Hello, YouTube and podcast listeners. What's up? It's me, Amaxter. We are back today, and we have a very special guest, King Lemming, who's the creator of Thermal Expansion and the leader of TeamCoFH. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty well. So, Thermal Expansion, CoFH, like, how did all that stuff begin?
So basically, that was just kind of a side project where I sat down one day and my programming background is mainly C and embedded languages. And I kind of sat down one day and said, okay, I want to learn Java. It's just a thing I want to do. Let me make a Minecraft mod. And that initially started with, hey, let me make a furnace that uses MJ, Minecraft Joules. This was back Minecraft 1.2.5, so this was like Buildcraft era. And after I made that, it's like, well, wow, this is actually pretty easy. So I made, I want to say it was 8 machines initially. It may have been 6, but that was Thermal Expansion 1. And a buddy of mine, Cynical, drew all the textures for me. Um, we grew up together, and he's a texture artist. It's what he does.
Huh. And you both happen to play Minecraft?
Yeah,
That's
actually,
pretty
we were
cool.
playing a 1.2.5 modded server. And I mean, this was back when nothing like worked with each other at all. Like it was terrible. It was the beginnings of Forge. It was still split client server processes. Red Power was a really big thing. IC2 was its own kind of monster there. Buildcraft was on the side, and they worked together, but it wasn't fluid. It wasn't great.
Yeah, I think that describes the situation then pretty well. I think, and especially then, the main way people played was with mod packs, still is, but I think stuff like Tekkit and the early days of Feed the Beast, that was a big thing back then. So, would you say, like, when would you say that thermal expansion started to gain prominence as a mod, like content wise and just community adoption wise?
I'd say it was so initially. Actually, there was a pretty good response to it because a lot of people preferred Minecraft Joules as a power source, and IC2 was really finicky, kind of, and it was definitely performance heavy, and it was really just brutal on servers. And it's not that Buildcraft was a whole lot better. Like things like the Quarry were absolutely absurd, but we had some really brilliant people in the community. CPW wrote a lot of the optimal Buildcraft code that went into the Quarry. I'm kind of digressing there, but so it was right about the 1.2.5.1.3 transition. It started picking up. And in that time, I was actually introduced to Zelda Kavira, who a lot of people know now works at Curse. And he had written the original Teleport Pipes mod. And basically, somebody got they got us together somehow in the same IRC room, and we said, "Hey, let's collaborate on stuff. Let's work together." And we did, and then it turned into Thermal Expansion is 2.0. People call it, it's not like Thaumcraft where it's been TE2, then TE3, TE4. People really just call it Thermal Expansion, but it was the 2.0 version. It got big. That's when we added the Redstone Energy. Uh, at the time, I want to say it was called Conduit, and the Redstone Energy Cell, which those two things were just mind blowing because it was a way to store MJ and it was a way to transport it without it being absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I think because the tools for that you were using MJ, which is the Buildcraft system, at that time were a little primitive compared to what we have today. So would you say that was the kind of like it was kind of a like if you had Buildcraft, you also need this. Was that the kind of general attitude at the time?
Uh, Typically, yeah, it got to the point where it's basically like Buildcraft has some really cool stuff, the pump and the quarry, some of the auto stuff, but their pipes are notoriously terrible in terms of moving energy around. They weren't great with items, they would spill and all that. This was still at the point where fluids was not in well, one, they were called liquids, and they were a Buildcraft thing. And they were only in Buildcraft, and then they still weren't ideal, right? So nothing in Buildcraft was coded all that well. One of the differences in thermal expansion is I really focused on server friendliness and hyper optimizing the code, which the general Java attitude tends to be profile it. If it's not a problem, then don't worry about it. But that's not really the case the way that the Minecraft server runs. Everything adds up. And we've tried to carry that through now. So I can look back and say that one of the things that contributed to the success was that we focused on the little things and we made it really server friendly and just really performant from the get go.
Yeah, it's always had a reputation for being, I think, both when it comes to balance and performance, very stable and very, about as friendly as a tech mod can get, which is, well, like you mentioned, why I think it's gotten such big adoption. And was it Thermal Expansion 3 where you moved from MJ to RF?
I want to say it was, yes. If I'm remembering now, oh, there were a lot of changes, but I think that was it. 2 to 3, I believe, was MJ to RF, and 3 to 4, I think, was augments. So I think that those were the big changes.
And RF was, your own system. You kind of moved on from Buildcraft MJ, and that was a big deal because, nowadays I think RF is still, a really big energy system. And in 1.7, it was the energy system. So, why do you think? Why did you make that decision? Why do you think it got so quickly adopted by a lot of other mods?
So, okay, there's this can be interpreted a lot of ways and cast through the lens of drama and all that. I don't want to do that. There were decisions. I mean, basically, we were dependent on MJ and the maintainers of the Buildcraft API. So at the time, there were decisions made in that API that a lot of people in the community did not agree with. Uh, and it's not like Buildcraft was being unreasonable. They basically said, hey, all these mods that are using MJ, you've taken our power source, our power API, and you've warped it into something that we don't want. So we're going to change the API up and we're going to enforce things like lossy transmission or constant drain by machines and things like that. And there were hacky ways to get around that, but it just felt like a clean break would have been a better call there. And there wasn't a migration over to IC2 because IC2's energy net is was actually even kind of worse.
Yeah, I think RF definitely like was a huge, I think, boon for tech mods in general because it was a standardized general thing and very simple. People criticize it for not being realistic, but I think it works for a lot of mods for the things they do. And when it comes to balance, lots of other mods like Mechanism, we've seen them do stuff like 5 times or duplication. Crazy stuff, and thermal expansion's always been relatively grounded in that regard. Why do you think that is?
Um, I mean, part of it is kind of how I view Minecraft is that I don't see bigger numbers as a progression towards the end game necessarily. It's about more interesting mechanics and forcing the player to explore, get out of their comfort zone, see new things. If it's just bigger and bigger, that doesn't it's not appealing because after a point it's just like why aren't you in creative mode? Um, so with TE, you can actually do there is a times 4 in there if you use Cinnabar, which requires getting pulverizing redstone ore, and there's a small chance of getting that, then using that as a flux in the induction smelter, and it's also guaranteed like secondary output, and that was a really big deal for something like nickel, which then you get, and nickel is called ferrous at the moment in 110. We're just going to go ahead, bite the bullet, and call it nickel. But you'll get platinum from that, and then use that to make Enderium. So it's sort of the whole mod is structured to force the player to not just progress in terms of numbers, but in terms of their exploration. So the redstone furnace requires, I mean, redstone clearly. All the T machines you need gold and redstone for. You need glass, so you need some sand at least. The furnace you need bricks, so you need clay. The induction smelter, you're getting into Invar, which again, that is, oh, hey, I need to use the pulverizer and mix these things and then smelt that and get a new metal, and then I can make the induction smelter. The crucible, you need nether brick, which means, hey, I need to go to the nether and do this. And if you can't find a fortress, there's a soul sand netherrack recipe to give you bricks. At the very least, it makes you get to the nether.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of it's kind of like this is gonna sound really weird, but like witchery, in that in like it's designed to complement, I think, vanilla or just is a tech mod that you're not trying to add like 50 different ores. You're just kind of trying to add a base, a foundation, if you will, and add in some other elements and mechanics that go on top of that.
Right.
Thermal expansion wasn't Team COFH's only mod. You had, Thermal Foundation, Redstone Arsenal, and your kind of other like core mods, as well as World Gen stuff. Why did you decide to kind of split that up into other mods?
So part of that was in the 164 era. Thermal expansion was this is turning into this unmaintainable mega mod. We were introducing all the ores, all the storage blocks. We had all the conduit, and at the time it was called conduit. Um, and it was just an issue that this was not something we all wanted in one jar. And there was sort of this sense that it became this behemoth, which was squashing everybody else. Like if it was there, then nobody else, no other mod really got their turn in the spotlight, and that's not really fair for anybody. So by modularizing it, by splitting off into foundation and expansion and dynamics, we were able to at least say, hey, here's some world gen stuff, here's some ores, because a lot of people loved the texture work done by Cynical on all the ores and the ingots and stuff like that. So even in a lot of packs that are not technical, they would put foundation in, like in a magic pack, because they liked the artwork and it was consistent and just polished. Expansion, the idea there was kind of machines and all the extra stuff. And dynamics, it got to the point where there were so many transportation options in the modded space that yeah, we were pretty proud of having a great one and very performant, low impact. But it again, it wasn't really fair to other mods in the space. And part of it is, we want to encourage innovation. We want to do the best that we can with all the mods. And it's interesting with the announcement that we're coming back for 110. The community's been kind of divided a little bit. I mean, it's been overwhelming. People have been happy about it, but there's been this weird like voice of dissent, like no, stay away, you're going to ruin everything again. I don't think we ever did ruin anything. I think the problem is people say, well, you kill innovation. I think we encourage it because I almost feel like when thermal expansion is in the modded world, then people say, okay, what can I do that's different? What can I do to complement it? When it's not present, people go, how can I replace thermal expansion? How can I recover what was lost? And those are two very different questions.
Yeah, for sure. And thermal expansion is kind of like it's almost like Wayla, where for many players, because they consider it that the tech mod, and like you mentioned, there's other dissenters who really are tired of that or think that that's the problem.
And that's
Um,
fair.
yeah, I mean, everyone has their own opinion. But I think one of the interesting things is I want to talk about 1.7 going to 1.8. I think many people know that was a really quite a chaotic time for the community. There was all sorts of mods, some that still haven't made it, some that did. New mods sprung up, and thermal expansion kind of went on a hiatus, and I guess, or so did you, on a modding
Right.
break. So I guess if we can discuss like why you decide to do that, and what do you think the lessons you kind of learned in your absence?
So part of that was when 1.8 came along, it very forced. By the not just Mojang, but the mod community in a sense, or part of it. Um, so Forge has a very good team. They're very capable developers, but they had this attitude that, oh, Mojang says we're moving on, so we're moving on. And it was like it was progress for the sake of progress, and it wasn't ready. And I can tell you now that because you had 182 and 184 and 189, and Forge was just pushing out all these new versions, and it was like a death march, right? And it was just forced. You will implement these features. You will do this, and it's just like, guys, the kind of stuff we're doing that we're capable of in 1.7.10, we can't do under Mojang's new model system yet. And we calculated it, and it for certain blocks. I think it was something in MFR. It was like you need more RAM than exists on the planet, or something. The way they initially did the JSONs, it was so stupid. And it's just like, all right, guys, this is a mistake. And to be fair though, or at least to make a point about MFR, maybe the block is too complicated at that point. I mean, I would argue if there's that many states, maybe the mod needs a little bit of rethinking. But it's a little bit of both. But yeah, I know 1.8 was brutal for the community in general, and 1.7.10 sort of formed the stable point. I would argue it's kind of the edge of a cliff, and then we don't really like 1.8 and 1.9 were somewhere in the air. They're on the ground, and 1.10 might be the next peak over for the mods that made the jump.
It was weird, especially for like Thaumcraft. That made the jump to 1.8.9, and then 1.9 to 1.10 kind of were a really hard time for that because now it's being rewritten again because the stuff it did in 1.8 doesn't work anymore.
Right. And part of that though is Asinor, and who is awesome by the way, fantastic modder. He does something similar to what I do, is that when I have the opportunity to completely rewrite the mod, I'm going to take it. And TE is every major version change pretty much, it's been rewritten. Like 1.2.5 to 1.3, that was consolidation of client and server, and that was annoying. That was terrible, whatever. 1.4, I want to say it was 1.4 and 1.5 were, uh, that might have been TE2, 1.6 was TE3, and then 1.7 TE4. So, when we do the port, we rewrite and we add new features. And I'm doing that literally right now. Covers ported everything, and it kind of works. I mean, it works as well as can be expected. But we kind of sat down and said, okay, this code is getting a little bit unmaintainable. Let's go through it. And I say, sledgehammer remodel because I just start tearing classes down and rebuilding everything. And he was okay with it.
And so you made that decision to kind of rework everything because you had the chance to because this was such a big jump from a technical perspective.
Right. And part of that was, I guess I should mention why, from a technical reason, we took a break. So in 1.7, we were relying on some certain render libraries that made rendering of models, complicate things convenient. In the base game, rendering machines was done in kind of a two-layer pass, and I was just kind of hacking the vanilla system again. But we were relying on some code from Chicken Bones for some of the more complicated models, and CCL was a brilliant rendering library, and it made it very efficient, very fast. He actually wrote that code for us and then ported it into Code Chicken Lib. Um, but then the problem is he also left because he's at university, he's very busy, has real life stuff going on. So when he kind of ducked out after that, it's sort of like I don't want to update CCL and then all our stuff and then that. And also I was finishing up my degree and getting a new job and new responsibilities and everything else. So it felt like a good time to take a break.
So you took this break, which is understandable because um, modders don't do things for money and stuff, and you have a lot of real life obligations. What do you think are the lessons you learned and the benefits you got from doing that? Because I think it was about a year long hiatus you took. What were the main takeaways from that?
So a lot of that was just addressing real life and the things that came along with it. New apartment, new job, all that. I still game. I've always really gamed. I modded Stellaris there for a while. It's a space 4X by Paradox. And that mod series is called Stellar Expansion. And one of the little things I learned from that is kind of some texturing techniques. So Cynical, I mean, he's still the official like texture artist for the team and does all that stuff. But doing Stellaris, I just kind of said, I want to try this. I want to draw my own textures and figure out the artwork and that. So I became a lot better about manipulating things on a pixel level. And now I've come back and I've actually done a couple of the textures on this. I don't feel too bad about it. But as far as just taking a break in general, it's nice. The community is so the modded Minecraft community can be a little bit toxic, and a little. I mean, it's nice. It is what it is, but sometimes there's more drama than I want to deal with. Most of the time, to be fair, but I'm not in it for the drama, and like you said, there's really no money, so not really doing it for that. It's a hobby. If I have time to do it, I'll do it. If I don't, I won't. I guess one of the realizations for me, though, in terms of coming back, was I used to say that whatever I've accomplished here is like nothing compared to what I've accomplished in real life. Because I finished up a PhD. I've helped to put with some very technical projects. I've worked at some pretty nice facilities. I have a lot to be proud of in my professional career, but thinking about it a little bit more, the chain reaction that started when I met Zelda now, it's actually turned into a lot because Zelda now works at Curse as a result of this mod. Cynical now works at Microsoft as a result of this mod. So it's actually changed some lives.
Yeah, I think that's something really cool that we don't think about often in the Minecraft modding because it's such a grassroots thing. What do you think is going to apply to thermal expansion and the other mods, going into 110? Like, why do you think they're going to be better than they would be otherwise, and how do you think they'll be better?
Um, I think in terms of code quality, they're going to be better. They're just going to be cleaner, more maintainable. I'll have more consistent style, which is mainly all for me, I admit. And as long as Mojang doesn't drastically rewrite some fundamental parts, it'll be a lot easier for us to go forward, and there shouldn't be a long break like there was. Now that we have a couple more people on the team, that may not be the case anymore. Um, they'll just kind of port it in my absence if I have to go again. But it's kind of given me, I'd say, not really another goal to shoot for, but better ways of like storyboarding it. Kind of like we had a design doc in terms of blocks. Like we want these blocks, these features. This is something we want to do, and I've kind of moved from that to this is the general feel I want the mod to have. And here are the high level things. And I mean, again, like I've done engineering projects, this shouldn't be a surprise, but applying it to modding in a more abstract way, that's different because the focus used to be so much on performance. And now it's more because we've got the performance nailed down. Like all at this point, COFH lib, COFH core, all the functions we rely on, the base methods, those are optimized. They're fantastic. So the higher level classes we write, like all our GUI stuff, whatever. We just kind of write what we want because we know the underlying parts are perfect.
So it's a good foundation that you want to build off of.
Yeah, and something I would like to do in, I guess, bringing it back to like Minecraft and the power, Buildcraft and the power system getting out of hand, at least from their perspective. I do feel kind of that way about RF now, and it's not really anybody's fault. Mods see a power system, they adopt it, they want it to work with other mods. Great, fine. Again, I don't think bigger numbers are end game. I don't think a lot of the things that exist in like the RF stratosphere or whatever it's turned into, I'm not sure that's necessary. So I think mods which move forward, and anything that we write like post TE in terms of progression, yeah, we'll have RF in it, but it won't be just like larger numbers. I want to force players to get out there again. I'd like to change what people think is end game. So, and the other thing I got to admit, I have, I'm coming back and I'm not looking at the modding landscape. I might even be introducing features that have already existed and people are going to go, so what? And that's kind of the thing is I don't, and we never really have looked at other mods and said, we want to copy that. We want to chase them and we want to do it better. That's never been it. It's always been the game could work like this. We want it to work like this. And I think on some level that resonates with people, but it's basically I don't go chasing other mods. Like I said, there are mods that in our absence come around and say, well, we want to replace what we lost with TE. No, don't do that. Change it.
Yeah, I think there's been lots of stuff that's changed, and some of that stuff I think is inevitable. You know, like NEI becoming JEI, or that becoming the new standard, and just adoption of new mods. When it comes to that, you know, you mentioned that philosophy of not you know, being inspired or copying other mods directly, but how do you think you're going to integrate with newer mods in 110? Do you think that's going to be any different from before?
Um, we're going to use RF still. If the Forge energy system is easy enough, and I mean, I understand the selling point of capabilities is they're extremely easy. I'm not convinced on their performance yet. We'll see. We'll integrate as reasonably as we can. I'm going to look to some of the modders I trust on this one, not really their content, but them as programmers and devs, and say, okay, what should I support? How should this work? And I'll kind of go with that. MCJTY with RF tools. I'm pretty much going to trust what he says as far as power systems.
Hmm. Yeah, I think Forge Energy was such a weird thing and kind of shock for the community, but I do think by and large people are still sticking by their guns with RF.
Well, Forge Energy was a weird one because this is again kind of Forge pushing its latest and greatest features. And this is, I won't say Death March in this case, but they are really pushing capabilities hard. And I don't think capabilities are ready yet. I think they have some syncing issues. I think from a technical perspective, they're not perfect. It's not a bad idea, but I think the overhead on servers is maybe a little bit higher than interfaces, even if it's easier to dev for. So the Forge Energy System is something that Lex actually came to me and said, "Hey, can I write RF for Forge as a capability?" And I said, "Sure." I mean, because I was never going to write RF as a capability. That was never happening. So now, if people do ask me to, I can say, "Oh, it's already done, and it's part of Forge. It's official. You use that, and that's fine."
Hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned like server performance and stuff. Like 110, one of the big complaints is that it is quite a memory hog. Uh, and that's you know, that's a tough thing. Some people can't even run modded anymore without giving it like 4 gigs, depending on how many mods they have. How do you think you're gonna approach, you know, in the near future, memory optimization?
So that's one of those things that's going to be best handled by Forge and some of the lower level mods. It's not something we can really address directly in, say, thermal expansion. They're going to interface with what they have to. Now, at the moment in CC lib, it's kind of a system where it bakes the model on demand because otherwise TE's machines would have way too many permutations, and putting all that in memory is not unreasonable, but it's not necessary. So trying to sort of use things like that. I hear there's some good stuff like foam fix. I haven't used it, but I've heard about it, and I think Forge is going to take some of those optimizations into account. At some point, they're going to have to address memory a little bit, but at the same time, it is 2017. 4 gigs is not unreasonable to ask for. I would argue it's actually kind of low because you're going to get 4 gigs on a cell phone you buy now. So, I mean, I get it. People, I am saying that from a position where if my video card died tomorrow, I could buy a replacement. And I understand not everybody's in that situation, but it is one of those things that PC gaming has never been a cheap hobby. So they should, there's at least a minimal barrier to entry, and I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for 4 gigs. I think it's a little bit unreasonable that Mojang has drastically accelerated the memory curve so much. And CPW did a post on Reddit, I want to say about a month ago, uh, about how it's accelerated and how it's changed and why. And a lot of this you can really put it on Mojang. It's kind of their fault, but I get why they did it.
So yeah, I think Minecraft has always been an accessible game, and so you know, even though 4 gigs is not that much, I think it's good that stuff like foam fix and, you know, forge optimizations are coming in terms of, you know, easing that for people who aren't on like the bleeding edge or anywhere close to it, because of their financial situation or just the computer they have or whatever reason. But moving on, like to content and other mods like Thermal Foundation, which is I think the World Gen one, lots of people have been excited for that, not just thermal expansion, but also in 110 being able to customize the world generation like they can for people who like to customize ores for packs or for gameplay styles. Because I think that's a really appreciated feature in it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's getting some small rewrites because of there's new ores that, or not really ores, but blocks that Minecraft's introduced, andesite, granite, diorite, and that's all. Those are vanilla origin events, so they're things that we can hijack and control again. I think Emerald is finally allowable now through Forge, so we can control Emerald generation, which that'll be nice. There might be some minor format changes, but for the most part, yeah, it's going to be the same as it was in 1.7.10.
So in the future for Team COFH, what do you see happening in regards to we're going from possibly to 111 if that becomes a big version, and in regards to what other mods do you have planned or what do you have planned for the mods you already have? Where do you see that going?
So as far as 111 and kind of future versions, as long as it's not um, too difficult to port, it's something that yeah I'd like to do. But content wise, so this is kind of a rewrite. Like I said, right now this is technically going to be TE5, and the idea here is, and maybe I'm getting this from Stellaris, but it's to make things a little bit more modular. So TE in a sense still has, at least in 1.7.10, it's got the machines and the dynamos and all the little extra blocks and the lights and the tesseracts and plates, and it just kind of goes on. It's this big list of things, and I want to break that up a little bit. So some of the things already in this version that have changed, we've moved like all the base materials to foundation, like the power coils, things of that nature, fertilizer, little like slag and cinnabar. TE at the moment in dev is just machines, devices, and dynamos. And device, as at least in the way I use that term, is a machine that interacts with the world, whereas a machine is just like a process thing. So I'd like to build on top of this and kind of build a more of a hierarchy. So there will be, and I've talked about it before, kind of a thermal ascension will be sort of on top of expansion, but there might be some more to the side. I've actually pulled tesseracts out of thermal expansion. I want them to get a bit of a rewrite. I want to sort of, I mean, it's not they weren't optimal or weren't working quite right, but they felt off in terms of theme. So I want to give more of the Ender theme sort of a proper place in the tech tree.
And I think that's fitting given what 110 has done to the end as well.
Yeah.
So the gist I'm getting from Thermal Ascension is it's end game kind of content with gadgets that will do new things that we haven't seen before in tech mods. Is that right?
That's part of the hope. End game is a weird term as it exists in this community because if I say that, then people are going to expect, oh, it's going to take 100,000 RF per tick. It's like, no, 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 no. I want to get away from that. So I've got ideas of introducing sort of flux will be a thing, but it's going to be how flux kind of interacts with the natural world and how you surpass just kind of boring tech and bring some magic into it, and then actually kind of fit with the theme of Minecraft. Because Minecraft, I feel, is a bit of both. There's clearly a magic element. You have enchanting, you have stuff like that, and we explore the tech side of it a lot. But the magic side is pretty underused, and in terms of Magitech, that tends to just manifest as blatantly overpowered tech mods. It's not really like an exploration of the magical side of things. So I want Ascension to be a little bit about both. I want it to kind of be an exploration of the conflict between magic and tech and a way to unify that.
Pretty exciting. I think both the thermal expansion port, which people are waiting heavily on, the other mods, and what you mentioned is planned for thermal ascension. Thanks so much for coming on today. It's been awesome having you on. Any more closing thoughts?
Um, no, nothing offhand. Just we have a really great community, and it's nice to be a part of it. You've had some great modders on this show, so thank you for counting me in those ranks. I do appreciate that.
Oh yeah, thanks. Well, of course. I'm sure the community will appreciate this episode, and it's been once again great having you on. And again, thank you to all of you watching and listening, whatever you're doing, YouTubing or podcasting. Thanks for listening to this. It's a little longer than most episodes, but hopefully you guys will appreciate that, and hopefully it turns out well. So yeah, thanks, and see you in the next one. Goodbye. Hey, quick note after the show. Thank you to Jonathan for supporting me on Patreon. If you want to join him and support the show, then feel free to check out the link in the video description and support me on Patreon. Thanks, and see you in the next one.